Hey friends, welcome to Flite Test. I'm Josh. Today we're going to be showing you how to build, tune, and fly the Strix StratoSurfer. Now if you've never heard of this plane before, it's been around for many years. It's quite possibly one of the most innovative and versatile planes I've ever seen here. A great experience for beginners, but can also grow with you all the way up through FPV and advanced flight. Now one thing we're going to be doing with this build, tune, and fly is we're going to take you through the assembly, we're going to take you through the tuning process, and also give you lots of great flight tips to make sure you have a great experience with this plane. Now the great folks at Strix did a lot of stuff to make this plane go together really simple. You're not going to be having much time on the bench, and I promise you building this is going to be an incredible experience for you. Let's go ahead and get our kit and we'll get started. One thing that you're going to notice about the whole Strix lineup here is that it's incredibly well packaged. Everything comes individually boxed, so it's durable in the shipping, but it's also going to be really easy to unbox and identify your components. So here we have our wings that are also capable of having flaps added to them. We have our rudder assembly, our FPV assembly, our wing hardware, our servo extensions, and our prop. In this box we have our main spar, our power pod, our horizontal control surface, and also our two-part canopy. And our final box has our main fuselage. One thing I really love about the Strix line, and specifically the StratoSurfer, is the fuselage already has a hard wooden mount put in and all the hardware to make it basically ready to start building. And lastly, we have our decals and our very simple quick start guide. Now everything we're going to be showing you in the building of this is also going to be found here, so make sure you save this because it does have other valuable information you can go back to and reference later. We're going to start our build process now, so let's go ahead and grab our fuselage, our horizontal, and our vertical tail. For the assembly of our main fuselage, we're going to need our horizontal tail, our vertical tail, our main fuselage piece, the hardware from our nose piece here, and our servo extensions. Make sure you have those pieces ready along with some tape, a ruler, and a screwdriver. Our first step is to identify the two longest servo extensions and to fasten them and tape them to both our rudder and our elevator. When you're doing this, make sure that your signal wire lines up with your signal wire. In some cases, your signal wire may be white or it may also be yellow. Once you fasten this, take a piece of tape and tape your connection. It's really important that you tape these connections because you don't want them coming loose during flight or transport. Same process on our elevator. Again, we're lining up the signal wire with the signal wire, pressing it all the way in, and then taping it. With both of our extensions fastened, we're going to go ahead and friction fit the tail together. And we're going to guide the wires through the fuselage up towards the nose. Once the servo wires are fed through, we're going to go ahead and press the vertical stabilizer down into place until it stays firmly on the bottom of the fuselage. We're now going to locate our 40mm screw from our hardware pack. It's the shortest one here. Flipping the fuselage over on its back, we're going to go and pass the screw down through the hole, and we're going to move the stabilizer and the rudder around until it passes through the stabilizer and engages into the rudder. Once your screw engages, go ahead and use your screwdriver to go ahead and fasten it down into the vertical stabilizer. Once you feel the screw engage, go ahead and tighten it down until your horizontal stabilizer and your rudder are nice and firm. Make sure you don't over tighten this and just get it snug. With your tail assembly fastened on, go ahead and route your two extension wires here all the way to the front so we can plug it into the receiver later. For my extension wires, I'm going to route them underneath this plywood piece here. This piece is actually really useful if you have something like a flight stabilizer, or you have a GPS module, or if you have any kind of FPV gear that you want to go ahead and keep separate from your receiver and your battery compartment. I'm going to wire this up to the front because I'm going to mount our flight controller right here on this portion that you see. There we go. At this point, our fuselage is done. We're going to go ahead and assemble our wings. So for the wing assembly, we're going to need our left and right wing, our power pod, our hardware, which is the 4 remaining screws, our Y harness, and our main spar. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pass our main spar into one side of the wing, roughly halfway through. and then our second half. And we're going to stop when we're about 1 inch apart. Just like this. With our spar in place, we're going to go ahead and install our Y harness, once again making sure that we're very careful to match up our signal wire with our signal wire. In this case, it's going to be the white wire to the white wire on both sides of the wing. Just like before, it's always a good idea to take a little piece of tape and tape your servo connections. Let's bring our fuselage back in, and we're going to go ahead and pass our Y connection up towards the front, where we're going to be making our connections with our flight controller. Now we're going to go ahead and unwrap our power pod, our ESC, and fully extend it. Carefully pass your ESC and your servo wire through so you can access it with the rest of your connections. The channel just in front of the spar is going to be meant for routing our ESC wires. Once you have that in its appropriate channel, go ahead and close the wing the rest of the way. Now that our wing is fully closed, it'll index with the leading edge on the fuselage that you see here. We're going to carefully guide these wires down in and make sure that when we mount our power pod that there's no wires on either side of the power pod and the wing surface. Our next step is to pass our 4 screws down through the wing and the power pod and let them engage with the fuselage. You may notice that you have to give a little wiggle here and there just to get them to pass through all the way down. Now I have all 4 screws engaged with the fuselage. Take a special note about the distance between the head of the screw and the bottom of the power pod. That'll be a good reference point to say that you're right about where you need to be to get the screw to grip into the fuselage and tighten down properly. Make sure all 4 of your screws are engaged and that you can't pull them up with your fingernail before screwing them down tight. Using my pointer finger, I can actually feel where the bolts are fully engaged down through the fuselage and popping out the other side. This is a really good indicator that everything is screwed down and nice and snug. At this point, we're ready to install our receiver. Now, one thing you want to make sure is that you install a full range receiver like this, maybe this 4-channel, or if you're going to put optional flaps in later, you can use a 6-channel as well. Instead of installing this receiver, which is very straightforward, I'm going to go ahead and use our FT Auralite 5 board. Now the cool thing about this board is because we intend to teach people how to fly off of this off a ready-made RC runway, I want to go ahead and put a board in that will actually help us with level assist, launch assist, and features like that to make the best flying experience possible. Now if you guys are looking to install this, it's very, very simple, and also the manual included with this will show it to you. All you simply need to do is plug your aileron into your aileron port, throttle into throttle port, rudder into rudder port, and elevator into elevator port. I want to take you through the process with this one because it's a little bit unique, and my hope is that if you're getting into the hobby and you start with this, it's going to give you a much better first experience. So let's go ahead and get this unpackaged and we'll take you through the Aura 5 board. So we have our unpackaged FT Aura 5 board here, and you're going to see our flight control board, 2 pieces of sticky mounting tape, our male-to-male adapter, our programming cable, and also I have unpackaged our satellite receiver from Spectrum that we're going to be using to plug into this. The really nice thing about the FT Aura 5 board is we can set this whole entire board up, including servo direction, without the use of a computer. For mounting our board, the first thing we're going to do is just cut a little tiny notch in the side of our double mounting tape just so we can have a nice flat surface that'll go around the capacitor of our control board. There we go. Before we install this in the airplane, go ahead and make your connection for your satellite receiver just because it's going to be easier to reach this control board right now. When we mount this into the airplane, it's really important that we mount this with our pins facing towards the tail and our connection and our satellite pointing towards the nose. This is going to be the proper direction for mounting our control boards without the use of a computer. Now that we have the Aura 5 plugged in and everything routed well, let's go ahead and go through our binding process. Binding this specifically with the Aura 5 board is very simple. We're always going to make sure whenever we're doing processes like this that we haven't installed the prop. So if you've installed your prop, make sure you take that off now. Go ahead and plug in your battery, and we're going to look at our receiver here and wait until we get a flashing orange light. Now that we have a flashing orange light, we're going to power on our transmitter while holding down the bind button.
DSMX 22 milliseconds. Bind complete.
There we go. So let's go ahead and check all of our controls here. Our ailerons move when we move our aileron stick, our elevator moves when we move our elevator stick, and our rudder moves when we move our rudder stick. Now there's one important thing we want to make sure we do before we move any further, and that's make sure our transmitter is set to 125% travel on elevator, rudder, and aileron. If you do this, you're going to get the most benefit out of your aura board and also the best tune. So it's very important, along with our travel adjustment, that we also select our gear port to a switch that has a 3 position. This is going to give you the most benefit out of your aura board and also the 3 pre-tuned features. For this, we're going to go ahead and go to System Setup. We'll hit Yes. We're going to go down to Channel Assign. We're going to go to Next. We're going to go down to Gear. We're going to click on it, and in this case I want this to be at Gear Switch C. So all I'm going to do is just flip this. We can see here next to Gear that C is selected, and now we can back out of it. Now that our travel is adjusted and that we also have our gear switch to a 3-position switch, we can go ahead and move on. You're going to notice when I give it aileron control that when I push the stick to the right, that the aileron doesn't go right. Also, when I pull back on the stick for elevator, that the elevator goes down. But my rudder, when I push my rudder to the right, the rudder does indeed move right. So in this case, we need to go ahead and reverse the direction of our ailerons and our elevator. To do this, we don't need to use a transmitter and we don't need to use a computer. All we need to do is go into our quick set mode, and that's simply done by pressing down both your trim button and your bind button at the same time and waiting for the flashing lights. Let's go do that now. All right, pressing this down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our flashing green light. Now that we're in quick set mode, we can instantly check both for servo direction and for gyro direction. The first thing we want to do is check our servo direction. So when I go ahead and I push my stick to the right, you're going to see it gives me a left input. We don't want that. And when I tilt my plane down past 30 degrees, it's actually giving me more right direction instead of a left input to level me back out. We don't want this. The way we simply change this over is by taking our aileron direction and we go ahead and hold the stick for about 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And there we go. Now when I give right input, I have right input. And also checking my gyros, when I tilt it to the right, it's giving me a left command, which tells me I want to level out. And let's go ahead and do the same process in our elevator. When I pull back on my elevator stick, I'm giving a down input. I don't want that. Also, when I pitch the nose down, I'm getting more of a down input where it should be telling me to go back up. We always want our gyros to tell the plane to return to a level attitude. To reverse this, it's just the same way we did our ailerons. We're going to go ahead and hold our elevator stick back for about 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go, it's reversed. Now when I give that up input, I have up input, and when I pitch that nose down, I'm getting an up deflection, which is returning me back to level. Let's go ahead and check our rudder. When I give right, I have right input. When I give left, I have left input. That's exactly what we want when we check our gyros. You can see it works just perfectly. All right, all of our controls are set up here. We're ready to move on to our next step, which is going to be activating our 6-axis gyros. To do this, all we simply need to do is hold down on our bind button for about 6 seconds while in our quick set mode. This is going to activate 6 gyro mode, so when we're in the center position of our 3-position switch, we're going to have level assist. Level assist is going to return the plane to level, and it's going to be a fantastic tool, especially if you're a first-time flyer. To activate level assist on mode 2, first thing we're going to do is we're going to hold down on our buy button and we're going to wait for the light to turn blue. We're also going to listen for the channels to cycle through 2 times. Hold down the bind button, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There it turns blue. We're releasing. And we're good to go. At this point now, we can go ahead and we can hold down both buttons and leave quick set mode. Hold down both buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Releasing. Rapid flashing means reset. And we're out of quick set mode and we're ready to check our controls one last time. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and take you through the 3 modes that we automatically have programmed through our Aura 5 board. The top position has no gyros. In other words, as I wiggle this around, you're going to see that nothing's reacting. That's exactly what we want and what we'll do our initial test flights off of. Mode 2 is our level assist mode. This mode is going to give us basically a constant desire to return to level, specifically on the ailerons and the elevator. You're going to notice as we bank this to the right, it's constantly giving us aileron control until we return to neutral. Same thing when we pitch down, The elevator is holding a constant up input to return us to level. That's what we want. Mode 3 is going to be high gains and high rate gyros. This is going to be really good for fast flying, cruising around, and also keeping us from having the wind bother us. So in this case, you can see as I wiggle this, it's reacting, but it's not holding it. So as I'm wiggling it around, you can see it's reacting to the input, but it's not going to go ahead and return us to level flight. That's exactly what we want. At this point, we have our aura board configured. We can go ahead and disconnect our batteries, put our prop on, and start talking about proper CG. We're going to go ahead and locate the included prop here and unwrap it. Now there's something very important with this prop. We want to make sure we put this on the right direction. Typically with pushers, the prop is in the back, but the prop is always going to stay in the same orientation. The easiest way to tell the front of the prop versus the back of the prop is by the numbers printed on the prop. Make sure that your numbers are always pointing towards the direction of flight. In this case, the numbers are going to be pointing towards the nose. If your numbers point towards the tail, it will produce thrust, but it's going to be very loud and very inefficient, and simply your plane won't fly. Along with our prop, we have this bushing kit. Now this is a precision bushing kit, and we'll use this to get the proper fitting to make sure our prop doesn't vibrate when it's spinning. Let's go ahead and unscrew the prop bolt, and then we're going to find our right size bushing here. This will be this top one. We'll press that into place on the back of our prop, and then slide it down. It's really important that if the prop vibrates, it's going to cause a lot of problems, not only with future FPV, but also with that flight stabilizer. It's also going to rob us with a lot of power. There we go. Let's go ahead and tighten down our prop nut with a wrench. We're going to go ahead and use our Flite Test prop driver. Now, if you don't have this, you can use a crescent wrench or a pair of pliers. Just be really careful that you don't damage the nut or the motor or the prop. So we're going to go ahead and hold this in place and tighten down the prop. There we go. Now when we do this run up here, we're going to be checking for vibration. If you have any kind of vibration, you can use a small piece of tape on the leading edge of one side of the prop or the other, and that tiny little piece of tape will actually help balance the prop. Now typically, these props don't need any balancing, but it is really important if you're going to be doing any kind of FPV or you want maximum performance out of your motor. With our prop installed, our next step here is to establish our center of gravity. Now what center of gravity is where the plane needs to properly balance in order to fly well. This is oftentimes around the first third of the wing, but the specification specifically on the StratoSurfer is 65 to 70 millimeters back from the leading edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker and my ruler, and I'm going to put two little dots on the wings, so whenever I put a new battery in, I can always make sure that it's at the proper CG. The battery size and where it's positioned inside the fuselage is going to be what establishes our center of gravity. I'm going to go ahead, and in this case, I'm going to measure 65 centimeters back and put a dot. We know we can go a little bit behind here, but I want to focus on the front part of that balance to make sure that we're definitely not tail heavy. There's 65 millimeters there, and 65 millimeters there. This plane is specifically designed to take between a 3,000 and an 8,000 milliamp battery. You can use a smaller battery, but what you may need to do is actually add some nose weight into the front of the airplane. I definitely recommend using a 3,000 milliamp battery, and if you're going to be flying something like FPV or have a GoPro on the front, you can use a lighter battery because that extra nose weight is definitely going to help you. I'm going to go ahead and get a 3,000 milliamp battery, install it, and we'll position it for the proper center of gravity. So we have our 3,000 milliamp 3-cell. What we're going to do is we're going to slide this up into the front. And then we're going to place our two fingers on both sides of that center of gravity marks that we made. And what we're going to be looking for is just a slight nose down. Level's okay, slightly nose down is a little bit better, just because it's going to definitely assure that you are at the proper center of gravity here. You don't want this plane to accidentally be tail heavy, especially for your first flight. Once you get a couple flights under your belts, you can move the battery back and forth. Now, if you have different sized batteries here, one really cool feature you can do is take a Sharpie marker, and whenever you get that perfect center of gravity, write down the milliamp that you're flying and put a little line. At that point, whenever you put it back in the airplane, you can take it right to that line, and you'll know that your center of gravity will be proper every time. It's really easy if you have lighter batteries and heavier batteries to accidentally put it in the wrong position and have a poor flying experience. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and fire up our controls one last time. We're gonna make sure all of our controls are nice and centered. Because these planes are pre-centered at the factory, most likely everything should be perfectly centered, but if it's not, adjust the linkages, don't adjust it through the controller here because everything is dialed in through the Aura board at this point. We will have a video that we'll link to down below that shows how to do sub trim and quick trims out on the field and on the bench. That'll be down below. That'll help you to dial in this plane so all of your settings are actually on the board and not on your transmitter. This is going to be incredibly powerful, especially since you'll be flying different airplanes. You can simply bind and fly and have some fun. All right, so let's go ahead and power this on. There we go. All of our controls are nice and neutral. And we got plenty of power here with no vibration. At this point, we can power everything off. Let's go ahead and put our decals on and take it for our first flight. All right, so our StratoSurfer is now ready to launch here. We're actually out at Ready Made RC runway here. In case you guys didn't know, Ready Made stepped up in a big way and they sponsored this runway at the upper part of the grounds. This runway is absolutely perfect for wing racing, for quad racing, and also flying great planes like the Strix StratoSurfer. We're gonna go ahead and put the FT Aura in something called launch mode. Launch mode is basically where it'll keep your wings level for you as you launch the airplane and pitch it up about 30 degrees. All we have to do after going into launch mode is give it full throttle and give it a nice steady toss. If you guys wanna learn more about the features of the Aura, we'll have links down below to all of our videos from setup to flying and eventually profiles and advanced configuration. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a good toss into the wind. We'll see how she flies. Here we go. And so far I haven't even touched the controls yet and she's climbing beautifully. All right, I just took control. This plane definitely needs a nice firm hand launch into the wind here. It's heavier than most of the planes that you may be familiar with. So you always want to make sure that you launch it into the wind and give it a nice firm launch here. The wing loading is a little bit heavier because of that plastic fuselage, but it's also going to penetrate much better than normal. Oh, she flies great. Now we're about 30 minutes from a pretty big storm hitting us, so there's some pretty choppy wind up here, but the Aura is doing a really good job navigating that. This is our stock tune, and if we want to actually tune this to be a little bit better, we can do so. But right out of the box, everything's working beautifully. Now if you need to trim your airplane, we have videos showing how you can lock in your trims right on the Aura board and then reset your transmitter to 0. So you can basically just bind it like you do a normal quad and go fly without having to switch models. She's flying great. So cruising here, I'll be flying around, maintaining altitude right around 40% throttle. Typically between 40 and 50% is my happy cruising speed, and that's where you're going to get all the benefits of the wing and the tail and the maneuverability. It does have a gentle stall, but just keep in mind it is a heavier airplane, so you don't want to fly it off that tiny little prop, or it's not going to be very graceful or smooth. All right, chopping the throttle. Let's go ahead and glide it around a little bit. Look at that, she just goes so nice. Even in this wind, it's doing fantastic. A lot of times people think that you have to push the nose down and fly this with speed, but it will slow down very nicely. One thing to keep in mind though, if you are trying to land it and you force the nose down, the plane's going to fly much farther than you'd ever anticipate. So just be careful about that. Find your glide slope and do a couple practice approaches. One thing that the Strix has that many other planes like this don't have is it's really dialed in its thrust angle beautifully. In other words, when you give full throttle, it's not going to pitch the nose up or down on you. It's just going to give you a straight line thrust. And I can definitely feel this weather coming in here. It's getting colder and very, very choppy. But the nice thing with that Aura, especially if you're flying FPV, it's going to take out most of those issues. All right, let's go ahead and do some basic aerobatics. Let's go ahead and do a 2-point roll. Look at that. Just a little bit of forward pressure, going into a wing over. Another roll. then we'll go into a big old loop. A little bit of speed, full back. Beautiful. All right, let's go back to some slow flight here. Let's just show you how great she does. I'm about 25% throttle, just a little bit of back pressure, and you can see she flies beautifully. Now this is going to be one of the airplanes we're going to be teaching here at Edgewater, so I wanted to set this up to be friendly for beginners too. And level assist mode right out of the box is going to work perfectly. It's just going to limit your turns to about a 45 to 60 degree turn, and your negative pitch 15 degrees, your positive pitch about 40, which is perfect for a plane like this. Let's go ahead and take it in for a landing here. Got some major wind coming in. We'll see if we can kind of milk this. So whenever we're setting up for landing, always make sure you're landing into the wind. Now unfortunately now we have a quartering crosswind here, so I'm going to go ahead and bleed off a lot of speed. One thing you don't want to do is try to dive this into the ground here. You really want to go ahead, I'm just going to kind of angle into it here. You really kind of want to find that glide slope, and she'll settle down much, much faster here. A little bit of flare, and that's all she takes. Basically, whenever you're learning to fly slow and you take it up into the air, that's the exact type of speed that you're going to want to be flying when you're landing, where you're not flying off the prop and you're also depleting that energy from the wing where it's gradually going down. If you find yourself having to force the nose down on a plane like this, all you're going to get is more speed equaling more lift, which means a longer runway here. So practice your glide slopes, and as you go down here, you're going to notice there's a certain rate of stink where you have full control, but you still have a much more rapid descent. This is an easy thing to do while you're up at altitude and at closed throttle. Friends, I want to thank you so much for being part of the Flite Test family. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the Strix with you. If you have any questions that I haven't answered in these built-in flies, please leave them down in the comments down below. I want to make sure these videos are custom tailored to you. And also, if you want to see built-in fly videos on other products, leave those down in the comments as well. We'll see you next time.